I ask all members of the committee to currently unmute themselves so that we don't have any accidents of you trying to start speaking with forgetting to unmute. So if all members could unmute. Fine, thank you. Right then, declarations of interest. Anyone got any declarations of interest? Councillor Bell.
Thank you, convener. Yeah, items 6 and 7. I'm a member of the Angus Health and Social Care Partnership. It's relevant to both items. I'll stay in and discuss. Thank you.
Right, the minute of the previous meeting. Is that the correct minute? That's the correct minute. Do we agree it?
Great.
Wait a minute. Okay. Can we go back to Councillor Devine?
Thank you. Thanks, convener.
I thought you had something to say, and I was wondering why you didn't.
Well, I had my hand up. I had my blue hand up.
I didn't see it. Sorry. This time. Right.
Yeah, it's quite a small thing, really, convener. But I did want to say thanks very much to Karen for putting so much detail in the minutes and actually mentioning who asked what. On page 10, I had asked about the PEF funding audit, and I thought it was agreed that we would prioritise that given the difficulties with poverty and over the COVID period. But it wasn't itemised in the committee agreed part. So I just wondered if that should be in there. I mean, the fact that it's not been done, I'm not surprised, there's just so much going on, but just for a clear record, I would have thought that might be better. Thank you.
Okay.
Yeah, convener, yes, I've taken a note of it. It's obviously within the minutes, and that would have actually been pointed out to all the officers post the meeting in an action log, which we actually do internally.
Okay.
So rather than put into a recommendation, there's some action points that don't necessarily go into the recommendations, but are followed through from ourselves onto officers post meeting.
Is that satisfactory, Councillor Devine?
Yes, that's fine. I didn't know that's what happened.
Right, thank you very much. Anything else? That agreed is correct minute?
Agreed.
No, you've got your hand up. Is that intentional? Kathy Wiley.
Yeah, it was really just to say I do have that audit on my radar. We haven't managed to start it yet, but we will be doing it as soon as we can.
Okay, thank you. Right, anything else on the minute? Agree to correct minute? Right. Can we move forward to item 4, Scottish Fire and Rescue? Can I ask Gordon Pride to speak to this, please?
Thank you very much, convener. Before I pass to Group Commander Scott Gibson to give an overview of the quarterly report, I would just like to inform members that I've asked Scott to undertake a review of the local fire plan, and during the COVID period we've been unable to engage as much as we'd like. But he's prepared a review of this local fire plan, and I'll ask him to send it out following this meeting for members' awareness, and then we'll be looking to bring it to the next scrutiny meeting to discuss and agree it, hopefully, to allow us to run with that new plan.
So that would be a second item on the fire report at the next meeting. You'd have the standing report and then you have your fire plan.
Yes, we'll make sure you're fully involved, convener.
Okay, fine, thank you.
Thank you very much. And I'd now like to pass on to Scott to give an overview of the report, please. Scott.
Thanks, Gordon. Good afternoon, everyone. So just referring to the highlights page of our report, which is page 22 of your report pack. This sets out our key successes and challenges during Q1, which we're asking the committee to note. And as per normal arrangements, I'll run through these performance highlights, and following that, happy to answer any questions relating to any area of the report. First of all, bullet points 1 and 2, we've seen a slight increase in Q1 of accidental dwelling fires. However, the number of accidental dwelling fire casualties is lower than the 3-year average. The target for these has been reduced for the year 2021 in line with our own Scottish Fire and Rescue Service performance management framework. Generally, overall in Angus, the numbers are quite low, and there are no trends identified that are of any concern to myself within Angus. Because of the number of ADFs dropping in general, it's having a positive impact on keeping the number of fire-related casualties low as well. Also added to this is the fact that people in households are better prepared for fires in the home due to the extensive work we have been carrying out in regard to home fire safety visits and the partnership working that we've built up over the past few years. We're seeing an increase in number of partnership referral pathways, which is allowing us to target those people that are most at risk within the community. However, during Q1, due to the COVID, most of our engagement has been virtual, other than those that are at a very high risk, which we've still continued to engage with on a face-to-face basis. Looking at bullet point 3, we've only experienced 3 non-domestic building fires during Q1, which is very low. Again, this has been attributed to the impact of COVID and the number of business premises which were closed. This type of fire overall in Angus accounts for very low numbers. However, it is important because obviously with these types of incidents, it has an impact on the business community and the productivity. Our annual target for non-domestics is to keep them below 15, so a single figure increase is enough to change the performance from a positive to a negative. Keeping these numbers down is a priority for us, and reducing the impact of them is important as well. Most of these fires in non-domestic premises within Angus are classed as low severity. That positive result is because of the fire safety management arrangements within buildings. They're generally of a good standard, and we're getting assurances of that through building standards colleagues and their fire safety audit regimes. So no concern regarding non-domestic fires, but we'll monitor it as we go forward. During Q1, we've carried out a large number of telephone consultations to engage with businesses on their continuity plans in light of the COVID pandemic as well. Referring to bullet point 4, again, a very low number of RTCs and related casualties during Q1. Again, the spread is quite even across the area. Sadly, there was 1 fatal casualty during Q1 in a road traffic collision in the Monifeith area. And there were 4 non-fatal casualties, which is again below the average. We're putting this again down to the COVID and the impact that the limited traffic on the roads has had during the pandemic. RTCs still remain the biggest killer of 15 to 24-year-olds in Scotland and will continue to try and change this statistic. I'd also like to provide some more context around the other special services that we're becoming increasingly involved in surrounding Priority 3. In total, there were 64 special services in Q1. Over half were affecting entry and assisting other agencies, predominantly where there was concern for the occupier. There were also incidents where we acted as a first responder, attended flooding incidents, assisted animals in rescue, and rescued people from lifts. Going forward, I'll continue to include additional statistics around this area within the report. At bullet point 5, I've highlighted that UFAS incidents were way down during Q1, and again, reverting that back to the COVID and the fact that the buildings have not been occupied over the period of the quarter. Over the past 3 years, we've been aiming to reduce these UFAS incidents by unwanted fire alarm signals by 5% year on year, which has been quite challenging because of external factors such as improvement in building regulations and more open plan buildings, leading to an increase in detection. We've carried out enhanced intervention procedures by giving verbal advice to owners, and we've increased this further by producing leaflets and passing on advice through these leaflets to premises. And we're still focused on reducing these where possible, especially those that have persistent call-outs. We'll constantly review our rate of response to these as well to try and reduce the road risk and the impact on our resources and the costs that they incur. And referring to bullet point 6, I've highlighted the increase in deliberate fires over the first quarter of this year, which I found quite unusual. So further investigation, I've noticed a trend in deliberate primary fires around the Monifeith and Sidlow areas, and again a similar trend with secondary fires. There's also been a rise in secondary fires around the Forfar and Arbroath areas. I'm currently working with our crews in these areas and the engagement teams in Angus and Dundee to work around the Monifeith and Sidlow areas with the youths, and with Angus teams in Forfar and Arbroath to do the same. It's proved difficult at the moment due to a lack of face-to-face engagement, and we're trying to get education packages onto the school's curriculum just to assist with this. And finally, referring to bullet points 7 and 8, I would like the committee to note that although during Q1 we'd faced difficulties regarding training of our staff, we have managed to ensure our crews are continually prepared for the role, and we continue to risk assess premises that are high risk remotely and are now managing to start back with our face-to-face visits. We've also supported the Local Resilience Partnership throughout this period of the pandemic, offering up our services as required, and some of this is highlighted within Appendix 2 of the report for you to see. That concludes the input on the report, and happy to take any questions.
Okay. Bids for questions. Councillor Bell.
Pages 32, 34 together, please.
Councillor Whiteside.
Page 22, please.
Councillor Devine.
32.
32.
Yeah.
Anyone else? Right. Can we start off with Councillor Whiteside on page 22, please?
Thanks, convener. It was just a comment in response to the information was heard there about the fires in Montefiore and Sidlaw. Is it the usual suspect of the empty Strathmartin Hospital, or are you finding problems all over the ward?
There has been certain instances in the Strathmartin area, but we're finding it more towards, I think it's over towards the Claver House in the parks areas. And again, it appears to be that cross-border area between Dundee and Angus, which is why we're trying to put some engagement in, predominantly actually with the Dundee schools through our Dundee teams, because I think the areas that we're seeing an increase in is the areas that the children and that are coming from that Dundee side of the boundary. So we're putting the work in on that side.
Okay, thanks.
Okay. Councillor Bell, page 32.
Thanks very much. Thank you, Scott. I've been dealing with a lot of concerns around rough camping and water supply pollution, huge amounts of littering, and even the chopping down and burning of trees in beauty spots in my ward. And I don't know if those have ended up in reports to the fire service at all. But I wanted to link that up with the youth engagement work. And I would suggest that some of those issues are being caused by people who are maybe older than youths, and also that this is a bit of a national problem at the moment, post-COVID lockdown. So I wondered what intelligence you had around that, and any plans that there might be with the service to engage with partners and communities, not just locally but nationally, on all these issues around people not knowing really how to behave out in the countryside and abusing the rights that they have without taking responsibility for their actions.
So thanks for the comments, Councillor Bell. To be honest, it's not something that I've been made aware of until now within Angus, that it's been highlighted as an issue to us. I am aware that we have had it highlighted as an issue within, I think it was Perth and Kinross area, and maybe asked Gordon Pride to come in at that point, because I believe we did some work in one of the other local authority areas with the police in regards to engagement.
Thank you very much, Scott. Yes, I'll come in. We've done some work through the police focus group, targeting some of those areas of wild camping. We're working with partners, including local authority in Perth and Kinross, police and others. We are, through the Local Resilience Partnership, we will be working not only with the Perth and Kinross but with Angus and Dundee to make sure it's a joint approach. And again, through the Local Resilience Partnership, there's a police group being set up under the auspices of Police Scotland to target a lot of this work and make sure the education piece is there. In addition, Scottish Fire and Rescue Service are trying to support the local messaging that's coming out, and that'll be coming out through the LRP comms group to ensure that local communities are aware of the guidance that is out there around the current COVID pandemic. But again, we'll continue to work in partnership with others.
Follow-up, convener. Could I just make the point that wild camping is allowed and it's covered in the Scottish Outdoor Access Code. This goes beyond wild camping. Responsible wild campers don't leave a mess behind, and I would hate to see restrictions on that kind of activity for people who are responsible. This is a different level. I use the word rough camping, but maybe dirty camping is more appropriate for some of these areas. I would just like to commend people who genuinely are wild campers and have always been so, that they do behave responsibly, and this is not them.
It's possibly I misquoted myself there. A lot of the work has been to engage, support, offer sort of bin bags to campers just to make sure everyone's clearing up after each other and working as positively as possible to try and get ourselves through this currently challenging period.
Okay, thank you.
Councillor Devine, you wanted to come in on page 32 as well.
I did, and it's just very local, to do with round about the old leisure centre and the play park in Forfar. I know there have been a few fires there and they have been lit by young people. There is quite an effort on the part of police and the council to deal with this, but it might be quite good if you could liaise also with a couple of youth workers who are working down there from Pit Stop. It would just be helpful to work on this together. Thank you.
Okay.
Thanks for that, Councillor Devine. Yeah, so just the work that we have been doing in the Forfar area, I take on board the point about the fires around the leisure centre area, which we are aware of, and we've got the community engagement teams working with them locally, but I wasn't aware of Pit Stop, so I'll ask our community engagement teams to make contact with them and see if we can work in collaboration with them.
That's great. Thank you very much.
Councillor Bell, you had something on page 34.
I linked it up, the two items together around group engagement.
Councillor Brace, what do you want to speak about?
Yes, well, it's about that subject of the sort of fire raising, and I just wanted a comment maybe from Mr. Gibson. I note that in the following police report that vandalism's well down, and I would have linked the two together. You know, I would have thought if vandalism was up, then we might have seen more of these fires as well, but obviously not in this case. Thank you.
Yeah, there is certainly a correlation between vandalism and obviously fire raising and antisocial behaviour, and we do work continuously in partnership with our police colleagues, with our engagement teams in these local communities. I can't really explain. I don't have any explanation for the upsurge in fire raising, but the downturn in vandalism. To be honest, I could only ask the question, so I don't know if Gordon's got anything to add.
Okay, Councillor Brace.
Yeah, that's fine.
Okay then, take your hand down, Councillor Brace.
Yeah.
Right, we're asked to note this particular report. Is that agreed?
Agreed.
Right then, can we move on to the police report, and can I welcome Superintendent Elaine Logue?
Convener, it's Wayne Morrison. Can I just ask if you can hear my voice?
Yes, we can hear you fine, Wayne, thank you.
Superintendent Logue is on, but she's not hearing any of the meeting. I don't know if there's anything you can do at your side.
Sorry, can I just interject? There is a mobile number in the waiting room, but I don't recognise the number, so I don't know if that's her or not.
Give me a second, I'll confirm her number for you.
Just the last 3 digits would be fine, rather than reading out the whole number.
Yeah, just bear with me. 136. Did you get that? 136?
No, it ends in 688.
Stand by. Apologies about this. It might be our works mobile. I've got a personal one.
Superintendent Logue, are you hearing me?
Yes, can hear you now, thank you.
All right then, can I just hand over to you to start the police report?
Excellent, thank you. Good afternoon, everyone. As you can see, you've got our quarter one, our first police report of this year in front of you. As you'll see, this hopefully correlates to you and reminds you of our local police plan, which was agreed previous committees. We've tried to have some sort of consistency through the reports to try and make it easier for you to read and cross-refer over. So our scrutiny reports certainly and our local police plans are monitored through our monthly tasking and delivery meetings within the division, and certainly the local police area commander, Chief Inspector Morrison, monitors that on a daily basis within the Angus area. So if I take you through the report, and the first page there shows you really the plan on the page where our local priorities, 7 identified as relevant to yourself in Angus, linking with our objectives and ultimately what our outcomes are intended to be. Slight change in format to your scrutiny report to reflect that new local police plan, and hopefully what you find useful is the addition of the summary report, the one-page summary, shown to you on page 42, which gives you a snapshot really of the first quarter's statistics and an indication of trends where we've seen an increase or decrease in crimes, and also in the detection rate for some of those priority crimes. And thereafter then the main body of the report takes you through each of those priorities in order, linking them in with the community plan to show where we're certainly embedded in the community planning, provides a bit of operational context, and then goes into each of the priorities in a little bit more detail, providing you with statistical breakdown there. So I'll pass on to Wayne, and he'll take you through some of the detail of that report, and then we'll come back and answer any questions.
Thank you.
Okay, we start with page 45 in your report, the violence, serious assaults for the first quarter. Very good result. We've reduced the crimes by 12 crimes. We were 19 this time last year, we're 7 this year, and all of the crimes have been detected. Out of the 7 crimes that were committed, alcohol was a factor in 4 of the crimes, and 2 of the serious assaults were actually committed in premises for looked after children. Moving on to assaults, again another good reduction, 115 crimes down to 224 crimes, and an improved detection rate up 8% in the first quarter. Obviously COVID-19 has a significant impact on our figures, but if you look across the other local authorities, you'll see that there's not been such significant reductions in detection rates in Dundee or Perth and Kinross. Moving on to robbery, again a reduction of 50%. We're sitting at 4 crimes as opposed to 8 this time last year. All the crimes have been detected, and the 4 crimes we had, weapons were used in 3 of these crimes. Moving on to page 50 of your report, the acquisitive crime, again positive for theft by house break-ins and dwellings. 13 crimes reported in the first quarter as opposed to 22 the previous year. I will say our detection rates have fallen slightly. We were very good last year for detection rates, but because of COVID-19, we had to risk assess how we were putting scenes of crimes officers to certain crimes, and some of their activity was curtailed due to COVID restrictions, which obviously affects our opportunities to detect housebreaking. The one increase in acquisitive crime is fraud. No surprise to everyone, online fraud being particularly prevalent, an increase of 25 crimes, which is almost double what we had last year. Again, detection rates are low because even the most simplest fraud has complex natures, trying to find the locus, sort of the area where it featured, and whether the crime actually sits in Tayside, if it sits in Angus. And obviously the point of gain a lot of the times are either in other parts of the UK or out with the UK. Our shoplifting, again, shoplifting down 20 crimes to 48, and detection rate has also dropped. What we're finding with the shoplifting just now is we're not being alerted at the time. It's normally when managers of shops have been doing stock checks, they're finding stuff missing, they're reviewing their CCTV, and in most cases we're finding people coming in probably with baseball hats and masks on to comply with the lockdown restrictions, which obviously makes identification of the perpetrator a bit difficult. Alcohol is the most commonly stolen item at the minute. It's been a problem for the last, I've seen it rise in the last sort of 4 to 6 weeks as well. But the mask, wearing the face mask, has definitely curtailed our detection opportunities. Moving on to road safety, page 55. Unfortunately, there's been 1 person killed in a fatal road traffic collision this year in Monteith in June. A mail has been reported to the Procurator Fiscal for that. Moving on to speeding, probably no surprise, a 75% reduction in speeding offences, and that's probably down to the reduction in traffic due to the lockdown measures, and obviously the safety camera partnership vehicles were withdrawn for a 2 to 3 month period during lockdown. The surprise for me is the drink driving numbers of persons providing a positive specimen is up on the previous last year. And given the reduction of road use, that was probably unexpected. I went to the road policing unit to ask why that could be. And basically, they're saying they had significant resources due to abstractions being halted during the lockdown period. And people that were on the road, it was easier to spot their poor driving habits and stop them. And there was also an increase in reporting from members of the public, particularly around maybe neighbours or that they know they've maybe been drinking in their garden and jumping in their car, probably pop down to the supermarket to get more drink. So that's the only explanation I can have for that, because there wasn't, obviously you all have seen a really reduced volume of traffic on the roads. Moving on to public protection, page 60 in your report, missing people reports rose from 27 to 44 reports in comparison to last year. The only explanation I can give for that is this time last year we were not recording every incident as a missing person report, but due to statistics now, and it's every time we get any sort of thing, even if we find someone within 15 minutes, we have to put a missing person report on. That might account for the rise in the numbers. Domestic abuse, very similar numbers of crimes compared to the previous year. 205 domestic related offences recorded as of the 30th of June. Again, we had to tweak some of our processes for domestic abuse, but it was still a priority for the LPA, and that was, if you've seen that in the detection rates, were significantly higher, almost 18% higher in domestic related offences. The figures in your report relate specifically to the Domestic Abuse Scotland Act and not all the domestic linked crime we've been dealing with in the first quarter. Hate crime, a slight increase in the numbers of crimes recorded. I think we were 3 up on last year. When you break it down, 6 of the cases, the victim and the offender were known to each other. A lot of neighbour squabbles, particularly with the COVID, and then inappropriate comments made across a garden fence. 2 were directed at police officers and 1 at a security officer. As I say, it's all unacceptable comments. There's not been any violence in any of the racially aggravated conduct that we've noted so far in the first quarter. Moving on to the sexual crime, there was a significant reduction in sexual crime over the reporting period, with a reduction of 26 crimes, which equates to about 50%. Around 50% of the crimes were recorded against children, with half of these crimes being online offences. And the detection rate increased significantly by 22% compared to the previous year. And finally, moving on to serious and organised crime, page 65. A bit of surprise to me, the possession of controlled drugs. The number of crimes increased by 14%, and although our proactivity was curtailed with COVID-19, I think we were just better at using our intelligence and making sure our stop and searches were appropriate and positive result from them. Our supply charges, again, exactly the same as last year, and given a lot of our proactive work again was temporarily halted during lockdown, I think it's a reasonable number so far for the first quarter. And that's a summary of the report.
Okay, I'm just trying to get back to the start of it again. All right, bids for the questions, Councillor Devine.
42 and 68.
Councillor Laurie.
62.
Councillor Bell.
61, 62, 67 and 68, please.
Councillor Duff.
Page 56.
Anyone else? No, right. Councillor Duff, page 56.
Number 42.
Oh, sorry, beg your pardon, Councillor Devine, page 42. Councillor Devine.
Thank you. Superintendent Logue, I think this is a really nice layout. I appreciate these boxes, and I think that gives us good information, but I was just wondering, under which heading does hate crime come? Because I know it's being mentioned later on, well on in the report, but I don't see it under any of these headings. Which one do you think it would come under?
Yeah, Councillor, thank you for your comments in relation to how that information is presented. That's really useful and I appreciate that. We've not actually presented the hate crime figures in these boxes. You'll see there are 9, 12, 15 boxes. So we didn't present a box for each measure that we've provided information on within the detail of the report. What we've done is pick out some of the headlines for you. So hate crime really is referred to through the detail of the report. It falls under the public protection chapter within the document.
Under public protection, right? Okay, thank you.
Okay, Councillor Devine.
Yes, thanks.
Okay, Councillor Duff, page 56.
Thanks, convener. Yes, it's a question about speeding, really. I'm conscious that Angus Council, probably like many other councils in Scotland, are in the process of implementing 20-mile-per-hour speed limits in many parts of our towns. I just wonder, presumably Police Scotland are aware of this, and I just wonder where this will figure in the sort of enforcement regime of the traffic police. Be interested just to hear what the police's attitude to this will be.
I'll take that one, Superintendent, if you're okay.
Thanks, Wayne.
Yeah, Councillor Duff, yeah, we're fully aware of that. There's 41 20-mile-per-hour zones across Tayside now being designated. Like everything, we go on statistics, so collision and casualty history is the main driver for our road policing unit, and where they'll target speeders. Most of the information we have, we obviously take a lot of information from our KSIs, that it's the faster speeds that result in people being killed and people being seriously injured. So for us, yeah, the road policing unit will probably target speeders, particularly at schools in the 20-mile-per-hour zones. But it's basically down to, we're moving to 20 mile, we need to market it, try and get a change in behaviour of drivers, and if that's not working, then some traffic calming measures, maybe speed bumps, more signage, etc., etc. But it's something that the road policing unit, it will not be their priority, because, as I say, all our information shows us it's speed that is killing people and seriously injuring people.
Yeah, thanks, Chief Inspector. I think I'm conscious most elected members get lots of complaints from public about speeding, and obviously as the speed limit is lowered, hopefully, if you forgive me, I think some of this may be self-policed by the public, but I'm conscious I'm expecting to get more complaints about speeding, because people will say, oh, well, there's lots of cars here going above 20, and they'll expect something to be done about it. And I guess it's trying to manage the expectations of the public as to what the police can reasonably do. I mean, normally my first course of action is to ask the council's roads people to do a survey, and I'm conscious that they're in contact with yourselves about the results of those surveys. But I think we just need to watch it.
Yeah, agreed. Let's see what we can learn. But as I say, once we start to understand it fully, I think if we start to look at traffic calming measures and more information out to the public, and hopefully we'll get the message across.
Okay, Councillor Bell, page 61.
Thank you. Thanks very much for this report. I wanted to reflect briefly on the work of the Domestic Abuse Task Force, and commend officers particularly for their work in bringing a repeat offender to justice. This was a horrific litany of rape, abduction and assault, and in my view deserving of more than 9 years in jail, although I know that's not in your gift. It's hugely worrying that someone can repeat offend on the scale across so many different partners and so many years. But also in terms of the data that we've got in this report, I know there's a time lag. Are we now seeing, even anecdotally, a rise in domestic abuse reports since lockdown has eased? I know we discussed our concerns at the last Scrutiny and Audit meeting, and I know Angus Women's Aid predicted that we would get more issues coming out as people were able to get out of their home more easily. Is that happening?
I can only go on the figures, Councillor Bell. Just now, I'm actually seeing a decrease in comparison to last year, which is not surprising, because I thought last year, particularly as my first year in Angus, we had quite a bit of offending in Angus. It was relatively high, particularly the first 2 quarters. So obviously our report goes up to June 30th, where I would say the numbers were pretty equal. But current picture just now is we're actually seeing a reduction in the number of offences reported. So unless people are not coming forward, it has not been the great influx that we might have been expecting.
Okay, that's one to watch then. Thank you.
All right. For finish with that one, let's move on to page 62. I'm going to call Councillor Bell first. Councillor Laurie, will you unmute? Otherwise, we won't hear you. And Councillor Duff, are you still in the waiting room for something, or have you just left your hand up?
I've left my hand up. I'll lower it.
Okay. Councillor Bell.
Okay, thank you. I suspect Councillor Laurie will come in on the same thing. I was really pleased to see the figures for the hate crimes in the paper after my request at the last meeting. And while I know the numbers are low and there's a good detection rate, I do still fear that this is a tip of the iceberg, and I see a worrying trend on social media that reflects a lack of understanding about racism and the need to be anti-racist. And at the last full council, Councillor Laurie introduced a debate about this issue, and we had a deputation from a member of the Scottish Youth Parliament, Daniela Damptey, who was keen to see services reach out to diverse communities. And at the last Scrutiny and Audit, Chief Superintendent Todd raised the issue that they, reviewing the high map arrangements for Angus and across Tayside. Has any progress been able to be made on that, even given the challenges of COVID-19? Because I really get the sense that we're pushing at an open door there, and we really need to explore virtual ways of doing this and not stopping that progress, if you like.
There has been progress. I mean, the last meeting was March, and it's Inspector Gary Aiken from Arbroath as the lead for the Police Scotland in Angus. Obviously with COVID, the May meeting and probably our inability to access decent IT curtailed that. We've now have a meeting set up for the 30th of September. Gary's been speaking to Doreen Phillips, who's works for Angus Council, and also Colin Crosby for our Prevention Hub, who's had a lot to do with the Dundee high map. So Colin's been emailing partners across the board with his experience with Dundee who think it would be useful for the high map. So there is a meeting for the 3rd of September, Councillor, and I would ask that all the partners involved take a positive view and support the police as best they can to get this up and running.
I'm delighted to hear that. Thank you.
Councillor Laurie, page 62.
Thanks, Convener. Superintendent, first of all, thank you for including these statistics on racially aggravated hate crimes. Within the context of the Black Lives Matter movement and the global events that ignited it, it's important that we really take this seriously and really engage with our Black and minority ethnic communities. It is reassuring to see the local numbers so low. However, I'm assuming that the majority of incidents of hate crime will go unreported. At our last full meeting of the Council, Daniela Damptey, one of our members of Scottish Youth Parliament, addressed the Council on the topic of racial equality. Daniela said that many people of colour don't feel comfortable calling the police because they feel that they might not be believed. What's your response to that? How do we make sure that people of all backgrounds feel comfortable in approaching the police? And how do we encourage victims of hate crimes to come forward and be proactive in reporting these incidents?
Thank you, Councillor. Yes, and certainly we would encourage anybody to come forward and report instances of hate crime, whether they are the victim or indeed a witness or have certainly been party to on the periphery of such despicable crime. It's really through a process of building those relationships, raising awareness of the crime itself, and you'll hopefully have seen through our social media interactions that we're constantly trying to do that. There certainly have been media releases over the last week or so from myself in relation to that. It's something that's a focus not only for us in Tayside Division but for Police Scotland nationally. So by first of all raising awareness of the issue and indeed the crime itself, and then hopefully building on that trust and confidence for people to come forward. And through the robust investigation of incidents that are reported, it hopefully then reinforces that trust and confidence. And certainly similar to issues that we've seen in the past around about domestic violence and domestic abuse. Again, that was an area where we really had to build that confidence to victims to come forward and disclose to us, alongside, for example, group 2 sexual crimes. So hate crime is certainly very important to us, and we would like to encourage the reporting of that. And if that indeed does show us an increase in hate crime, that's something that we can certainly reflect around about the context, and that would then hopefully demonstrate the confidence in reporting. So it's just something that we have to be aware of going forward, that as we increase confidence, we may actually increase reporting. But again, something that we're content with, knowing that that's the context, we would be reassured by that.
Okay. Okay.
Can I just add that obviously in Angus we have third-party reporting centres. There's only 2, and one of them was recently trained just before COVID. We went back just to explore that, and they've asked for some further training, but there's no doubt we need more third-party reporting centres across Angus. We've only got 2 just now, but it's something we're trying to take forward to encourage people to come forward, so we get a better picture of the hate crime in Angus.
Okay. All right. If that's that one, let's proceed to page 67. Councillor Bell.
Thank you, convener. It was just to pick up on the counter-terrorism and domestic extremism narrative there. I was keen to find out some stats on people being identified through the PREVENT programme as at risk of being groomed into terrorism and extremism. Do we have any even national intelligence on that? I mean, local would be great, but even national.
From my point of view, it's something I would have to go and dig, Councillor Bell, to see if there's anything at all like that. I mean, that kind of world is sometimes quite secret. To try and get any information from them would be quite difficult, but I could go and ask the question.
I would appreciate that, thank you. I was keen to know the demographics as well.
Yep.
I appreciate that challenge.
Okay, we're finished with page 67. Can you carry on to page 68, Councillor Bell?
Okay, sorry, this is my last one on this paper. I wanted to pick up on the wildlife crime. I find it extremely embarrassing that Angus is a bit of a black hole for wildlife crime. And as your report states, it's a national outlier. And this, what jumped out at me may not have been deliberate, but I was a bit taken aback by the phrase that this is to be expected in a rural landscape like ours. I mean, I genuinely don't believe we should expect any wildlife crime, and people's actions in these regards are conscious decisions to break the law, regardless of whether it's trapping and baiting badgers, killing beavers, uprooting wild orchids, hare coursing, bird traps, vehicle theft, stealing eggs, or raptor persecution, when people absolutely know what the law is. I've had constituents raise instances of intimidation out in the hills and sightings of illegal traps and poisonings with me. And the big ticket issue always comes up is raptor persecution. And I always urge people to report these issues to the police, because without the data, we're completely in the dark. So I'm really pleased to know that these issues are being recognised and that additional resources have been drafted in to work collaboratively across Tayside. And obviously, I'm aware that the underlying issues here around land ownership and land use and monocultures are not in the gift of Police Scotland to change. But even with these extra resources, do you feel you now have enough resource to break down some of these really quite worrying detection figures? What are your targets for improving those stats? And especially during lockdown, when there have been vast tracts of Angus hidden from public view? I know it's a big issue.
It's a big question. Councillor, well, first of all, Vicky Crichton, who's our inspector for the Montrose section, she's now the rural lead for Tayside, which is a bonus, because we've got our finger on the pulse here. What we're basically trying to do is build up a much better picture. So we're tying in stuff across Angus, we're tying in stuff that's happening in Perth and Kinross with vehicles, individuals, because it is difficult to build a case to get sufficient evidence to report to the fiscal. However, if we're getting strands from Perth and Kinross, it might be a vehicle, it might be an individual, we're trying to pull all that together. And at the end of last year, in the last quarter, we done that with 4 or 5 individuals who were on the hair coursing scene. And standing alone, we didn't have enough evidence, but pulling all these incidents together and evidencing it from one witness here, one witness there, we put a very good case in against them, and I think that's still pending. We took their vehicles off them, etc. So it's all this time. It's once we get people, and I would suggest the officers find it difficult because it's out of the norm to go and find out about raptor persecution or a snare or something. Obviously, Blair Wilkie is the wildlife officer, and she's based in Angus and Forfar alongside, so she's got expertise and knowledge of all this. But officers will shy away from stuff they're not used to. So just getting the confidence to deal with stuff, knowing their powers, knowing that they can take vehicles from people committing this type of crime. And it might not be enough evidence for that particular incident, but seeing if we link everything together, we will detect crime. And again, we need, you've hit upon it, people need to report stuff. They need to be confident to report stuff and tell us what's happening. A lot of the time we'll get told 2 weeks later that, oh, someone was on my land or I seen somebody here. We need to know their details, need to know their vehicle, need to know who they are. So it's a work in progress, but we're getting there, and I'm pretty confident with Vicky driving it that things will get better.
Okay, thank you.
Councillor Devine.
Well, I don't really have that much to add to that, apart from the fact that I'm pleased to see that there's extra resource in there, and I do hope you manage that. The proactive approach about hair coursing is very welcome. I was just wondering if you have any information or get any information about the culling of hares, because there are thousands of hares culled, but they are killed every year. And I'm also very pleased that you raised the issue of the illegal snares, which unfortunately catch untargeted animals and are extremely cruel. Personally, I would like to see them banned completely, but could you answer the question about the hares, please? That would be good.
To be honest, I have no knowledge of hare culling. Is that by the landowners themselves?
Yes, usually.
It's something I've got to admit I'm unsighted on, but again, I could find out a little bit more about it and get back to you.
Yeah, thank you. I mean, we've seen photographs of fences just covered in dead hares. It's a most appalling sight.
Yeah, leave that one with me and I'll get back to you, Councillor Devine.
Thank you.
Okay, is there anything else on the police report? If not, we're asked to note it. Do we agree to note? Sorry? Councillor Brace, sorry.
Yes, thank you, convener. I think maybe to clarify, I think what Councillor Devine was talking about was culling of mountain hares. Brown hares are never culled in Angus now. They used to be right up till the mid-70s. There were regular hare shoots to keep numbers in check. But I'm not aware of anyone that shoots brown hares at all now in Angus.
Oh, well, sorry, it probably is mountain hares then, if you'll know.
Yeah, point still stands though, thanks.
Yes. Makes it a bit more specific. Right, we're asked to note this report. Do we agree to note it?
Good.
Thank you. We'll now excuse Fire Scotland and the police. They can carry on with their normal duties. Thank you very much for attending. And let's move on to item 6 and Cathy Wiley, please.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Cathy.
Yeah.
Before we start, Councillor Brace, have you got your hand up for item 6 or is it just still up for the last one?
I thought I'd taken it down.
That's it now. Thank you.
Thank you. Sorry.
Right, Cathy.
Okay, am I on mute? Can you hear me okay?
Yes, we can hear you fine.
Good, that's fine, thank you. So this is the normal activity update around the work, the progress with the plan, and also implementation of recommendations, but there's a few other things just to bring to your attention today. On page 73, just to draw your attention to Audit Scotland's Fraud and Irregularity Update for 2019-20. That full report is available on the members' SharePoint site if you want to go and have a bigger look at that. I've just included the common themes there in terms of why frauds have arisen in that year, and they do just kind of fall into categories of weak procedures and people not following procedures that are in place. And that is why when we present our reports, we do talk about the design of the control environment and the operation of the control environment when we're making our recommendations. We will bring a report to a future meeting. We'll look at all of the areas that have occurred in other places and just see what the controls in Angus are like, just to make sure that we've not got any of those weaknesses also lurking and might cause us some difficulty in the future. The other item on page 73 there is just to make you aware that the Scottish Government Directorate of Internal Audit and Assurance are in the process of working on a proof of concept about further work around grant fraud analytics in terms of some of the COVID-19 pandemic response. Angus is not involved. There are 2 councils that are involved in that early work, and we will get involved in due course if there's more work to be done there. If I move on now to the actual progress report, you'll remember at the end of June that because of the pandemic we had some work that hadn't been finalised from the 2018-19 and 19-20 plans. We're still in that situation. Again, the delays being caused by primarily 3 things. We've had 2 staff who were deployed to the emergency centre. We do have them back, although we've got one of them away again temporarily at the moment because of what's happening in Cooper Angus. Services that we've been trying to engage with, a number of them have been very busy and unable to engage with us in the timeframes that we would normally see. And we've also undertaken some new audit work that is very focused around some of the new risks that have emerged because of the pandemic. And that's all obviously had an impact on the previously planned work being able to be completed. I'm currently having a look at the plan just to see what we will be able to do, and we'll bring a new report up to the September committee meeting with proposals for how we deal with that situation. We do still have some projects on hold, and the tables there that start on page 78, these tables include all of the work that was still outstanding from previous years, plus all of the work that has been started from the current plan, just to keep you up to date on where these particular projects are. If I go now on to page 82, just to give you a brief overview of the work that we're reporting here. The first piece of work is a new piece of work that we did just for a number of areas, looking at changes to policies and procedures and some of the processes that were put in place in order to respond to the pandemic. And we've listed there the items and areas where we were involved, and the conclusion on page 83 that having been able to give that real-time audit input into the development of these areas, it's been able to give some assurance that these policies, procedures and guidance have been produced following good practice and have included appropriate controls. The data analysis that we undertake along payroll and creditors and accounts payable, that's all been undertaken for the period from April up to June. And although there were some anomalies that we investigated further, we didn't find any issues with any of the things that were identified, and we've been able to provide comprehensive assurance around both of these areas for the period that we've looked at so far this year. The next part is an update on the previous Audit Scotland fraud and irregularity review for 2018-19. We brought a report 160/20 previously that updated you on what Angus's controls in these areas that had caused fraud in other places, or been the cause of fraud in other places. But we didn't have the information from all of the areas. So this is an update on the children and learning service areas around school fundraising and the security of school property and laptops. I think just my observation there is just that the level of controls over the IT equipment in place in the schools does expose the council to some risk, but that's been assessed by the service as being an acceptable level of risk in comparison to the procedures that might be able to be put in place. From page 87 onwards, there's some information about a couple of IT audits, and once I'm finished presenting the rest of this. I'm going to come back to these and ask Paul Kelly from Scotland Crief to talk to you about those two, because he has more of an in-depth understanding of that work than I do. I'm going to move now on to page 93 and a piece of work that was an additional piece of work around the use of delegated powers. Chief Executive asked us to have a look at how these powers had been used, monitored and reported. And I'm pleased to say that having looked at that, we looked at the use of the Chief Executive powers and also some of the directors who were given additional delegated powers through the period of the initial pandemic response. And we've been able to give that comprehensive assurance. There were three areas of low-level recommendations that were identified while we were doing the work, but these were implemented immediately as soon as we discussed these with the staff involved. These are on page 95, and so we don't have an action plan for these because these have already been implemented. Page 94 onwards, we've got the information about the implementation of the actions resulting from the internal audit recommendations and from the counter fraud investigations. I don't intend to go into these in any detail. I'd just like to just note the fact that the 2017-18 finance outstanding actions has come down from 9 in the previous reporting to 2 this time. So it's good to see that these are being able to be cleared off. I would ask Paul now if we can return back to page, I think it's 87, and the Eclipse and the IT disaster recovery work, please.
Thank you, Cathy. Paul, please.
Thanks, Cathy. Thanks, convener. Just turning to page 87. So this is a review of it's a post-implementation review of the first phase of the Eclipse implementation. And this replaces the Care First system. And overall, actually, good health indicators there around about the project. One of the main things that we liked from this was the fact there'd been lessons learned throughout, that during phase 1 and then taken in to phase 2 as well, and that really shows a good culture of continuous improvement. Areas of improvement identified, and this is actually wider than just this project itself, was around benefits realisation and the importance of defining, quantifying and then monitoring benefits is really important in any project, and that's been taken forward at a corporate level, that recommendation. Moving on to page 90 of your papers on IT resilience and disaster recovery. Clearly, with the way we've been working, the majority, at least anyway, over the past few months, the resilience and recovery arrangements in IT has been exceptionally important. I think one of the things we had seen, it wasn't complete, but there's been significant investment made within the council on enhancing the resilience of the network that reduces ultimately the need to implement IT disaster recovery planning, or at least hopefully that would be the case. So a lot of work's been done on that, and we'd seen good progress being made and continuing to be made on that. And there's work also being done around about achieving greater consistency in the way applications are being managed, with more being done within IT around key applications. The areas for improvement, maybe just speaking to a couple of them here, is the first one was that there hadn't been any formal testing of the council's IT disaster recovery plan for some time. And it was planned to do that in May this year, but given what happened with COVID, that was actually part of a wider business continuity test, but that was shelved due to prioritising COVID-19 responses. And the other one is just about, and it links back to my previous point in good practice, is about there's a lot of work being done around about resilience over key solutions such as email, internet, and your Citrix desktops, etc. More work needs to be done to establish what resilience is in place around about those applications that are managed at an individual service level that are, I suppose, out with the immediate reach of IT, just to provide assurance on what level of resilience actually does exist. That was all I planned to say, and I'm happy to take any questions.
Okay, thank you. Cathy, have you got anything else to say? No? Fine. Right. Bids, Councillor Miles?
Yes, it's just a general comment on a point that Cathy raised.
General? Okay, anyone else got any bids? Councillor Devine? Page?
Page 93.
Anyone else? Well, if there's no one else, can we have Lynn Devine on, Councillor Devine on page 93?
Yeah, and this isn't a question, convener. I just wanted to congratulate all the officers who have taken on the onerous delegated powers that we've seen them doing over the last few months. I think it must have been hugely difficult to be able to do their own jobs and to take on the challenges of those as well. So I would like to give them our gratitude.
Thank you. Councillor Miles?
Yes, it's to touch on what Cathy Weil was saying on the outbreak at Cooper Angus. Although this is out with Angus, we've had a lot of knock-on effects, and there has been comment from Scottish Government of Tayside's handling of this outbreak, and it's been cited as exemplar. And that is due to the combined working of not just NHS, but all the local governments as well. And as Angus has a lot of employees that work at the Cooper Angus factory, there's been a huge amount of both testing and tracing and following it up. And it's just heartening to know that, that all agencies are well on top of that, and well done indeed.
Thank you, Councillor Miles. Anything else on item 6? We're asked to note item 6. Do we agree to note?
Good.
Thank you. Right, let's move on to item 7. I understand this is Mrs. Williamson that takes this one.
Yes, thank you, convener. This is a report that comes every year to Scrutiny and Audit Committee, and it really advises members of the governance assurances in respect of the organisation that form part of our group accounts. IGB, Tayside Contracts, the Tayside Valuation Joint Board and Angus Alive. As you'll have noted, the assurance statements are actually attached in Appendix 1, and the paper asks that the convener on behalf of the committee writes to both IGB and Angus Alive confirming the adequacy and effectiveness of the Council's governance arrangements. Happy to answer any questions.
I will confirm that subject to the committee agreeing to authorise me signing, I've given permission for my electronic signature to be appended to these documents.
Thank you.
Councillor Duff, you want to come in?
Yeah, thanks, convener. It was really just one question and I think one comment. I think the comment first, it's nice to see on page 113, just a follow-up of the committee's concerns about environmental health services, and the actions look like they are, I think, substantially complete. So I think it's good to get that reassurance, and thanks for all who've addressed that issue. I just wanted to ask a question about the 2 above, the freedom of information requests, where I note an 8% increase, and I think we were conscious that in the budget we need to employ additional staff resource to deal with that. Are there any particular trends in terms of FOI requests? Are we getting a lot from the press or various political entities, or is it just lots of individuals?
Councillor Duff, we as a corporate leadership team, we discuss all the complaints and FOIs that come in, and from recollection of discussing these each month, I would say that there isn't really a pattern for them. Sometimes it is MSP inquiries, as you outline. Sometimes I think it's students looking for us to do the research work, and other times it's specific items that have perhaps appeared in council papers previously, or something that's appeared in the press. I guess if Scrutiny and Audit were minded, we could bring some overview of what these key headings or themes look like, if it would be helpful.
I think that's what I'm driving at. I mean, I'm conscious that this is public money that's being used to carry out this work. And while I think we're all in favour of FOIs, I think we're all conscious that the process can perhaps be abused. And I don't know what we need to perhaps. I mean, I think there's a legitimate ones, and I think my suspicion is some of them are perhaps. I didn't realise students might be doing it to, pad out a PhD, but who knows? it does seem like whether we could, I don't know, that there maybe needs to be some hurdles that need to be jumped. I would have thought that, you know, because if it increases every year, I mean, we just have to keep employing more staff to do it. That's not good. I see you're noting it could be streamlined and digitized, but it does seem like unfortunate if the public are going to have to pay more and more each year for this.
Well, could I suggest that we would get a paper on this to the next Scrutiny and Audit Committee? Would that suit you guys enough?
That's a good idea. Thank you, Convener.
Right, so I have another couple of hands up. Councillor Bell, which page, please?
113 and 118, please.
And Councillor Devine, which page?
110.
Yes, we should have been at you first, Councillor Devine. Can we go back to 110, please? Councillor Devine.
It's just the first bullet point on improvement areas there. I hadn't been aware that anybody was working on community wealth building in Angus, but I'm delighted to see that they are, because I think it is a way forward for engaging with communities even better. I was reading a little bit and watching a video on North Ayrshire, who have been learning lessons from Preston, where there has been a great improvement in the local economy because of this. But my question really is, do you think this will feed into the PB process? Because it would be good to know that there was going to be improvement in that this year. Thank you.
Through you, Convener, I think this is something that is a really good point. I'll take it up with my communities colleagues and get a response back to Councillor Devine. But it makes absolute sense to me, and I guess that that is probably planned, but I would like to be sure that that connection is being made.
Okay, thanks very much.
Thank you. Councillor Bell, page 113.
Thank you. I wanted to echo Councillor Duff's remarks around our environmental health services. I particularly wanted to thank our EHOs for the work that they've done over the COVID period. I found them incredibly helpful and very responsive and supportive to helping retail outlets in my ward that had raised concerns about wanting to do things right, and environmental health were amazing and provided really helpful and easy checklists for businesses to use, and we're happy to pop in and take people through that during what is obviously a very challenging time, but that put a lot of people's minds at rest, and I found it just brilliant. They were great. So I'd like that on record, please.
And thank you. And then you had page 118.
I did. Yes, I wanted to pick up on the action around reviewing the whistleblowing policy, which has been in action points before, but this time it specifies in relation, well, particularly in relation to integration, and I just wondered what the rationale for that was, please, if anyone has anything.
I can respond to that, Convener. I mean, as with a number of things with integration, there's an NHS Tayside policy and there's an Angus Council policy, and depending on who is the employing body of the member of staff, the policy that is used with that member of staff is to do with the parent body. Now that all sounds pretty straightforward and reasonable. However, we have a situation often, because of the nature of integration, where the manager or the person who is overall responsible for the work comes from one agency and the member of staff perhaps comes from another. And there remains a challenge as to, well, which policy are we going to use to examine this issue? So as Tayside, across the three authorities, we have come together with NHS Tayside with a view to creating some integrated policies specific for human resources issues. And this would be one of them, that it would be a set policy that all staff working in the health and social care partnership would follow.
Okay.
That's brilliant.
Councillor Whiteside, which page?
Thanks, Convener. 110, sorry, it's just a quick supplementary question following up to Councillor Devine's question. I was just wondering if the current situation is likely to cause problems for the implementation of the PB process this year, and if so, would that have a knock-on effect on the target of achieving 1% of our budget in the following year?
I'll answer that question as best I can. I mean, there's been so much work, and it's lovely to see it appreciated by elected members. There's so much work going in from all teams within the council to support the immediate response to coronavirus, but also the ongoing changes and adaptations that are required, and the guidance that comes out alongside that. We are very enthusiastic to engage and have as many people participate in the work that we do in our communities. And PB and the communities team is something that we know that members feel is really important to them. So a few activities have been lined up that involve known people within communities connecting with us at the moment to ensure that communities have got a voice. We would want to use as many strategies as we possibly can for PB, and we would hope, and I'm choosing these words, and I know they sound a bit vague, and I don't mean to sound vague at all. We would hope that we would be able to deliver a good and robust PB under the circumstances that we're currently in, either in an electronic way or, if possible, with social distancing. But it's something that we realise is a priority to you as elected members, and to us, of course.
Okay.
Well, that's good to know.
Thank you. Right. Anything else on item 7? Okay, we have 3 things to do. Item 1 is to note the assurances. Do we do that? We're asked to authorise me to write on behalf of the council or behalf of the committee to the joint board and the Angus Alive. Do we agree that?
Agreed.
And we're asked to note the latest version of the draft annual government statement. Do we do that? Is that agreed? Thank you. Can we now proceed on to item 8, which is the Accounts Commission report? And I think this is Vivian Smith that's doing this. Mrs. Smith? Or is it Gordon Cargill?
Gordon.
Ah.
I think it's Gordon.
Yes, sorry, Convener, I was just trying to get myself unmuted and my video on there. Sorry about that. Yes, I'm deputising for Vivian Smith today. So, Convener, yes, I'll introduce this report. And this is the report that to make the committee aware of the local government overview report, which is prepared by the Accounts Commission, authored by Audit Scotland, and to share that with the committee. The full report, which is extensive, as you'll see from the papers, is included in Appendix 1, and Appendix 2 of the report also includes a paper which is questions for councillors, which councillors can use, if you like, interrogate how we're progressing against some of the issues that are emerging from that report. Last year, and I think possibly the year before, we had a development session for members specifically to look at that report, and also the financial report, which is already issued. I think it was January that one was issued. This one was around about June. And to bring those things together, to have a kind of a workshop session around those papers, and allow members the opportunity to drill into a bit more detail around the matters that have been raised nationally through this report. The cover report is also has information around really just trying to summarise some of the key recommendations that have come out from the report, and some of the key themes that have been identified. As part of the report, we've put together some evidence of progress, just to give members an idea of how the council's progressing, if you like, against these items that have been highlighted within the report. I'm happy to take any questions on that report, Convener.
Fine, thank you. Bids, please. Nobody want to speak on this one? Councillor Duff.
Yeah, I'd
Page, please. So that we don't jump back with.
You wanting the page numbers, are you?
Please, so we don't jump backwards and forwards.
139 and 179.
Anyone else? Did I see a hand? No, he's just waving at someone else. Okay, Councillor Whiteside.
I was 139 as well, so it may well be the same issue.
Councillor MacDonald.
157.
157. Anyone else? Okay, let's go with page 139, Councillor Duff.
Yeah, I think it might be. I have a different one which just occurred to me. On the core funding per head of councils, which is itemised on 139, and I probably should say beforehand, I found it a very good report, very useful, a lot of good reading in it. On the core funding per head, am I correct in the assumption that that is the total council funding? So that is grant plus non-domestic rates that we're looking at there for all the Scottish councils. I'm not sure if anyone knows that, but I was interested to know.
I would have to defer to maybe colleagues from Audit Scotland. I don't know if Rachel Brown, who's on the call.
Is Rachel Brown here? Does she know?
I am on the call. I have to say, I think you're correct, Councillor, but I couldn't swear to it, but I can find out and confirm for you.
If you could elect Councillor Duff.
Subsequent to the meeting.
Okay, right, that was the first bit. Anything else on page 139, Councillor Duff?
No, I'll leave my colleague to pick the other point up.
Councillor Whiteside.
Thanks, Convener. Like Councillor Duff, I found the report really interesting. There was a lot of good information in there. But the particular graph on page 39 I thought was a very strange format, quite difficult to read, and actually contains some mistakes. I was most surprised to find out, for example, that Angus was one of the most urban areas. I'm sure everybody else was as well. So it was just a comment on the format of the graph, which sometimes people try a little bit too hard, I think.
Yes, I must admit that I agree with you. I found this graph most confusing. It took me a long time to try and understand what they were going on about. But to say that Angus is more urban than places like Midlothian and Stirling and Falkirk, I just don't understand. And I think perhaps somebody needs to go back across this and also coordinate what says at the bottom of page 138, which says the darker shades indicate the most rural areas and the lighter the most urban. And the bit that says on the graph that the most rural are the lightest and the most urban are the darkest, directly conflicting. So a bit more proofreading, I think, required on this one. Right, anything else on page 139? No, right, Mark, Councillor MacDonald, page 157.
Thanks, Convener. After that comments from the Chair, I do also think it was an excellent report, some really, really fascinating stuff, like both Councillor Whiteside and Duff have said. And I really like the question marks on the side of the pages that make you sort of think, right, actually, where do I need to develop my knowledge to be a little bit better? And that's what I'm specifically looking at. And on 157, the fact that we're going to have a developmental day on this, maybe I'm jumping the gun a little bit, but I did just have a general query on the point 3 down about Highland shares its procurement service with Aberdeen City and Aberdeenshire councils. And it got me thinking about, obviously we've got a historical relationship with Dundee and the rest of Tayside. Have we as a council done much work looking to the north and working with other councils there? Sure, that'll be covered in Development Day, but it was just something that stood out to me, and I thought, well, you know, I've never really heard of us working with Aberdeenshire that much. So yeah, I just wondered if there's anyone could sort of give us a wee insight before we're looking at things deeper, maybe.
You want me to pick that up?
If you're happy to pick it up, please do so.
Gordon, are you picking it up, or do you want me to pick it up?
Yeah, I mean, I can pick up I mean, I know that and as far as Tayside goes, there is actually a Tayside procurement review programme going on at the moment, which is quite extensive, and obviously trying to do that on a Tayside basis. In terms of beyond that, it's not something that I'm aware of at this point in time, but I don't know if Margot has any further information she could add to that.
Yeah, through you, convener, just to add, yeah, we do have regular meetings with Aberdeenshire in particular, and there's a lot of ongoing work around economic development, particularly around food and trails for food and drink and the tourist industry around that. In terms of specific formal engagement and partnership working, where we're delivering as a dual council, we haven't got any arrangements in place, unlike we do with some of the other councils that has already been mentioned, particularly like Tayside contracts. But we'll keep the door open for that, because I think it's probably going to be even more important as we come through this COVID phase about how do we scale up in certain areas and make sure that people are supported as they should be.
I would just add that in recent years, in the southern part of Aberdeenshire on the A90, it's been Tayside contracts that have done the winter maintenance. So there is a bit of cooperation between councils. Okay, if we're happy about that, can we move on to page 179, Councillor Duff?
Yeah, thanks, convener. I mean, I've said already, I think it's been a very, very good, very useful report. I always look at the questions for councillors, and I normally look through it and think, yeah, I'm reasonably comfortable. But I have to say on this particular one, I found quite a lot of the questions I just put a question mark against, because I really wasn't sure. I'm not sure I know a lot about the sort of council's labour plans, you know, replacement policies, age profiles. I felt myself saying I don't know much about it. So I think there's some things there that perhaps if we are having a development day, we could address some of those. Yeah, I think that was really the point I wanted to make. Really, a feeling that there's a little bit of gaps in my knowledge that it would be good to fill in. But yeah, I think it's always useful to have these questions at the end just to see what you don't know effectively, which is important.
Yeah, I think that would be a good idea to add that into any development day programme. Just have a go over it with the whole committee. Okay. Anything further on item 8? We're asked to note this report. Is that agreed?
Agreed.
Right. Can I now ask Stephen Mill to deal with the 2019-20 unaudited accounts? Stephen?
Thanks, convener. Good afternoon, everybody. Yes, if I can refer you to item 9, yeah, starting at page 185 of your papers. This report covers the 2019-20 unaudited accounting statements for Angus Council. There's a hyperlink to the accounts in the body of the report that you'll want to open to this area of the council's internet where the accounts have been published on the website. As noted in paragraph 3.1 of the covering report, in light of COVID-19, flexibility was afforded to local authorities in Scotland to delay the publication of the unaudited accounts if they so wished. However, officers in Angus Council continued with our normal timetable for preparation, and the accounts were submitted to Audit Scotland for review on the normal due date of 30th of June and published thereafter. Now, the audited accounts would normally be submitted to the Scrutiny and Audit meeting at the end of September, together with a final report by Audit Scotland, and that would be seeking approval for signing of the audited accounts. As a result of resource pressures on Audit Scotland, it's been agreed with the convener of Scrutiny and Audit that these audited accounts will alternatively be presented at a special meeting of Scrutiny and Audit on the 24th of November. So that's a change to what is in the final paragraph of section 4 of the covering report, which mentions different dates. That date has been agreed now at 24th of November. Turning to the accounts themselves, I'd note firstly that a summary of the council's financial results for 2019-20 financial year were reported to the 12th of August council meeting in report 18820. So that's a report that we usually put up each June, but because of COVID-19 and the introduction of the SAC meetings, that was delayed until the August council meeting. But that gives you a lot more detail and a better format than you'll see in the account. So if you want to know what our financial results were, I would direct you to there for more helpful layout. But anyway, the draft accounts were placed on the internet site and made available for public inspection during July. But today's the first opportunity for members to formally scrutinise the full detail in the accounts and ask questions. There's a large amount of detail in the accounts, but much of this is notes providing additional details and explanations and reconciliations between a host of figures in the accounts. Much of this detail is for more technical users of the accounts. I'm going to go on now to comment on the management commentary and the main areas of financial outturn for the council. Are you happy for me to proceed with that at present, convener?
That's all in the same report, is it?
That's this. I'm going to be referring now over to the accounts.
Oh, the accounts, yes, that's okay, yes.
Yeah. Okay. So yeah, I'd refer you first to the management commentary in pages 2 to 16 of the accounts. The numbers I'm referring to there are the numbers at the bottom of the page of the accounts rather than any PDF reference. But the management commentary is in pages 2 to 16, and it's perhaps the key statement for non-accountants. And we've tried there to summarise the key facts and figures pertaining to the council for 2019-20. Paragraph 10 on page 7 is particularly relevant as this gives a summary of our financial position at the close of the financial year, the 2019-20 financial year. And for anybody wishing to peruse the accounts, I would suggest the main statements that the committee would want to focus on would be the movement and reserve statement. So that's on page 41 of the accounts, and that outlines what reserves we had in place at the start of the year and what did we have in place at the end of the year. The other statement I would say is important is the comprehensive income and expenditure statement. That's on page 42, the one after the movement and reserve statement. And that statement shows how we performed against our budgeted income and expenditure for the year. I'd note though that that's on an accounting basis. So again, if you want it on a more palatable basis that you see in the monitoring reports during the course of the year, you won't get that from these accounts because they have to be done on an accounting basis. And that's why we produced that report that went to the August Council, because it produces the figures on the same basis as you've seen the rest of the year through revenue monitoring and capital monitoring reports. But that's the comprehensive income and expenditure statement. And the last one I would refer you to is the balance sheet a page later on page 43 of the accounts. And that basically shows are we still solvent, stroke financially healthy at the 31st of March 2020. So that's the main statements I would refer you to, the management commentary and those three statements. Highlights for the council. Firstly, the general fund revenue position. In summary, and as highlighted in section 10.2 on page 8 of the accounts, we ended 2019-20 £13.3 million better off than planned on the general fund. And that arose from four main sources. So energy and non-domestic rate savings of 1.4 million, slippage in projects of 1.8 million, capital financing cost savings of 1.8 million, and the largest element was to do with retention of prepaid government grants of £7 million. So that mainly related to early learning and childcare, where we had a significant amount of grant during 2019-20 that we put into balances to use in 2020-21, in the main to help with the capital costs of the projects that we're taking forward. Figure 4 on page 10 of the accounts shows the various reserves in place at 31st of March 2020. It may be noted there was a balance of 36.6 million in general fund balances. Now, figure 5 on page 11 demonstrates that 35.2 million of this sum is earmarked for specific purposes, together with another £500,000 for devolved school management. So once we remove those commitments from the 36.6 million, that leaves us with an uncommitted balance of £877,000 available for the council to use at discretion. However, if you've read the covering report, as noted in section 5 of the covering report, subsequent to the publication of these accounts at the end of June, we reviewed the level of 100% carry forwards, and they have reduced by 378,000. So if there are no further changes to any of the committed balances, that would mean the uncommitted balance will go from 877, increased by 378, to £1.255 million. And that figure is what is reflected in that outturn report that went to the council meeting in August. So the council meeting in August reflected that new figure, reflecting the change in treatment of carry forwards. And of course, 100% carry forwards will be coming to the 10th of September council meeting for formal approval. Looking at the HRA revenue position, the housing revenue account ended 2019-20 with a revenue saving of 295,000. However, after use of reserves to support the capital programme, it may be noted from figure 4 on page 10 that the HRA balance finished the year at 3.1 million. That's a reduction of 1.1 million. Overall capital position, so as noted in paragraph 10.3 on page 9, the council spent a gross sum of 42.3 million in capital. The programme was impacted by slippage though, with 8.9 million evident on the general fund and 6.5 million on the housing revenue account. Sections 10 and 11 of the management commentary provide the main reasons for this, but report 18820 to the council as well provides more detail in there. Probably more detail is in the account than is in the accounts by service of the reasons for that capital slippage. If we look at the balance sheet on page 43, so that shows our year-end position at 31st of March 2020. If you look at the 2019-20 column, our balance sheet shows a strong position with £533 million of net assets, so over £500 million. That's a year-on-year increase of 34 million, and the most material movements resulting in that 34 million increase are a £20 million increase in the value of our property, plant and equipment, and you can get more detail in note 11 on page 66 of the individual reasons for that 20 million increase. But it's mainly as a result of an increase in the value of council dwellings, and that mainly being through the transfer in of assets that were previously managed by Angus Community Care Charitable Trust organisation. Secondly, there was a 3 million increase in cash holdings. Again, more detail in note 15 on page 69, but that was mainly a result of comparatively higher cash investments at the year end. And the final reason for our increase in balance sheet was a £5 million reduction in other long-term liabilities. Again, more detail in note 31 on page 95, but that was mainly a result of reduced liabilities on finance leases, excuse me, and DPP projects as we made repayments for those liabilities. Now, I'd say it's important to remember that the position shown in the balance sheet is simply a snapshot. It doesn't reflect how liabilities would become payable for us, but it gives us a snapshot of our position and our financial health, although noting that a number of the reserves, as you can see from the bottom of the balance sheet, are not actually usable. Okay, in summary, for the council's overall position, I'd say, you know, our financial position can be considered to be good. We've had a good year in managing our finances through savings or underspends being evident. We've been dealing with budget pressures within cash limited budgets, and we've been dealing with delivering a significant capital programme albeit with slippage in HRA and General Fund. And we also still have fairly healthy reserves at 31st of March, albeit only a relatively small element of those is uncommitted. And I would conclude by noting that the management commentary includes this year, for the given the circumstances, coverage of possible financial and other impacts of COVID-19. So it's dotted throughout there, but we also have a section on COVID-19. Given the importance of that, a report will be presented to the Council meeting on 10th of September, detailing the financial impact of COVID-19 in 2020-21 and the Council's options for addressing those costs. Both the Policy and Budget Strategy Group and the Shadow Budget Group have had updates in this regard in the last week ahead of that Council meeting. And that's it for me. I'm happy to take any questions.
Mr. Duff, the page.
Yeah, thank you, convener. Page 9 and I think page 42 of the accounts. I had a couple of quick questions, although I think Mr. Mill may have touched on the answer to certainly one of them. Okay.
Councillor Bell?
Page 11 of the accounts, please.
Right. Okay. Right, Councillor Duff, page 9.
Page 9, yeah. I think the question I had really was around the slippage in the capital plan. I'm conscious when we do the capital plan for 5 years, we look at the funds available and then we add on 10% to allow for slippage. So we basically plan 10% more projects than we've actually got the money for, because we generally expect some slippage. This year, I think the slippage is round about 25% on the capital plan, and I think in recent years there has been significant slippage. So I guess it's more of a kind of one just to think about whether we should have perhaps a more over provision in the capital plan, because, you know, naively you would think if you're putting in 10% extra projects, it's because you expect 10% slippage, but the slippage does seem to be larger than that, and it's just a thought whether we need to plan more projects because the slippage is more than 10%. So that was really just, it was a kind of a question. I'm not expecting an answer now, but I thought it was a point worth making.
Yes, Stephen?
Yeah, I would agree with that. You've quoted 25%, Councillor Duff. Now, the CPMG, the Capital Programme Monitoring Group, gets statistics about the levels of slippage on a gross and net basis, and what the trends of that have been over the last few years. I think the 25% you're quoting is on a gross basis. The slippage target is done on a net basis, so it's actually 10% of our net budget after taking out specific grants, capital receipts, etc. So what we'd have to do a comparison against the net position, and I think that has varied. It's been between 10 and 20% over the last 5-6 years, but it has grown. It was 10 maybe 5-6 years ago, and it's been growing, and I think last year it was at 20%. So there's certainly an argument for revisiting whether that 10% needs to be upped, or the other side of that is we need to have more accurate budgeting to compensate.
Yep, I think I would agree with that. Yeah,
but it's worth looking at. I agree.
Right, Councillor Bell, page 11.
Okay, thank you, Stephen. Thanks for that. That was really helpful, taking us through that. My concern is around any Scottish Government funding for the HRA. Traditionally, over the last few years, Angus has done quite well in getting investment from the Scottish Government, and I'm concerned that any slippage might get clawed back. Has there been any comfort provided by the Scottish Government? Are we at that stage yet where COVID is being taken into account around slippage? Although I do know that there was already slippage prior to COVID on that account. I'm just worried we lose any money and therefore lose new homes for people.
Yeah, the Scottish Government has provided specific funding for a number of developments over recent years. I've not heard any risk with regard to that grant being removed. And certainly, there has been significant slippage on HRA, yes, during 1920 and going into 2021. Certainly we'll see updates which reflect significant slippage in the reports coming up to committee. But I've not heard any risk with regard to our grant funding, but that's something I'll take up with the head of housing, just to make sure that there is no risk there. Thank you for the question.
Right, Councillor Duff, page 42.
Yeah, thanks again, convener. Yeah, I think Mr. Mill did kind of touch on this one. The question I really had was a little bit of detail on the surplus on the revaluation of non-current assets. I'd heard you correct. This was mostly council housing. Was that correct?
Yes, our valuations go through a 5-year cycle. So we don't revalue everything in 1 year. It would be too expensive and too much work for the surveyors that we engage for that. So we go through a cycle of 5 years valuing all our properties. So yeah, this year, 2019-20 accounts were the turn of the council dwellings, and also because we brought in the ACCC properties, we wanted to make sure that we were happy with the valuations that we were bringing onto our balance sheet for them. So we didn't take ACCC's valuations, we got all those assets valued. And then there were an element of general fund properties that were revalued as well, investment properties being the main area. But it was mainly HRA this year that was revalued, and that will be HRA for another 5 years.
Yeah,
Okay.
thanks for that.
Fine, thank you. Right, anything else on item 9? Councillor Bell, would you like to put your hand down?
Yes, I was just about to do that.
Right, okay, we're asked to note this particular report. Are we agreed to note? Thank you. Mr. Mill, would you carry on with item 10, please? I will assume that's you. It's in the Director of Finance's name. Unmute, Stephen. Unmute. Stephen.
Yeah, I thought I'd press the button. It's the button's not quick enough. Sorry. Thank you, convener. Yeah, I'll pass over to Rachel Brown from Audit Scotland because it's actually their report, but I'll just do a very quick intro. Yeah, so Audit Scotland are progressing the review of the Council's annual accounts for 2019-20, and attached to this covering report is the normal interim report from the auditors on their progress so far. So this report mainly covers testing of the Council's systems of internal control. The report has a number of findings which are detailed in Exhibit 1 on page 196, and I'd note from my own perspective that these are generally involve the need for retention of evidence, checks, rather than any weaknesses being identified in the actual processes of internal control that we have. So I'll pass over to Rachel and she can talk to her own report.
Please.
Thanks, convener. Thanks, Stephen. Yes, this is a summary of our interim work to date. Ideally, it would come to you before you consider the unaudited accounts, but this year there's been a bit of a delay in our work due to COVID-19, because when that all kicked off at the end of March and lockdown started, we stepped back from public sector audits to allow bodies to respond and get critical services and frontline responders up and running. So some of our work has been delayed, and we're just picking that up now as part of our final accounts audit. We're required under auditing standards to obtain an understanding of the control environment in each audited body. So this is part of that work. And we also test the controls in systems that are used to prepare the figures that go into the financial statements. So, which is why we do the work before our final accounts audit. And there's a bit of a summary on the wider code work that we do beyond the financial statements, noting that some of it is just being postponed to next year, work on fraud, risk and procurement. We have the option as public sector auditors to report on it this year or next year. We will report on it next year because the Council's own actions in that area will now be postponed slightly. But that shouldn't have any major impact on what we're reporting this year. So we also comment on your engagement with the National Fraud Initiative, which, as in other years, is very positive. The Council is very active in NFI investigations and in working with other organisations in their NFI investigations. And you were a pilot council in a small business bonus scheme pilot NFI exercise that identified some outcomes both in the council and across the wider 7 pilot councils. So the Scottish Government's looking into whether that should be rolled out nationally, and also a reference to the national NFI report that's been published this year. In terms of Angus Council's own key financial controls, Stephen said there's a short summary at Exhibit 1 of recommendations for improvement actions, which are indeed around retention of evidence of checks that are being carried out to evidence to us. Those have operated throughout the year as intended. And there's one risk that we've identified a risk, but the council has agreed to accept it, which is similar to previous years as well. So there's one final point at the end of the report. We don't like to duplicate what internal audit does. We're just noting there was a key recommendation by internal audit that's still to be implemented. So we'll pay close attention to when that is implemented in future, and until that time we identify, as does internal audit, that there's a risk there. So I am happy to take any questions on the management report or on any timing of our audit, because that's going to be slightly later this year.
Thank you, Rachel. Anybody got any bids for questions? I'm not seeing anybody having raised their hand. The recommendations are to review the management report and provide any commentary. On the basis that nobody's got any comments, do we agree to note this report?
Indeed.
Thank you. Then we move on to report number 11, which I think is Mrs. Buchanan. Are you with us, Jackie? Jackie, please unmute. Thank you. That's it. So that's you now, is it? We're still not hearing or seeing you.
Councillor Kane, do you want me to introduce the report?
I think so, because I've got Jackie showing as being on both video and speaker, but I can't find her anywhere.
Well, I'll introduce the report, and hopefully she'll get back in and we can join.
I mean, she's showing up on screen now. Okay, carry on, please, Margot.
Okay, this is again a report that's known to Scrutiny and Audit Committee. It's an annual report that comes, and this outlines our complaints for the year. I think, and I didn't read this in preparation for presenting it, but I think we've got a total of 372 complaints closed off during the year, and quite clearly most of them were closed off at stage 1, with 45 progressing to stage 2. We take all complaints that we get from citizens very seriously, and we thoroughly investigate them and report back to the people who have submitted them. Part of that service requires us to include an evaluation of how they feel their complaint had been dealt with. And part of the report outlines people's satisfaction with that complaint process. Clearly, not everyone does respond as a consequence of that, and we actually get quite a low turnout. And some people, although their complaint may have been handled well, do not like the outcome of the complaint and obviously criticise the process. So the report you have in front of you outlines the complaints we've had over the course of the year and what specific areas they refer to. And I'm happy to take any questions on that.
Okay, bids for questions. Nobody got any questions? In that case, we are required to Consider the key performance indicators, the results of the satisfaction, and any complaints received by the service area. Do we agree to note this report?
Agreed.
Thank you. That, I think, concludes the business of the meeting. Thank you everybody, very much everybody, for being in attendance. And we'll